Congratulations on your new bike! Let's get it out of the box, put together, and ready for your ride. Let's get started. Remove your bike from the box and remove all the wrap and ties. Be careful not to cut any of the cables or soft parts of the bike, like the tires. Locate the owner's manual that came with the bike and review the contents. It has helpful illustrations and tips that can supplement this video guide. Then assemble the tools that will be needed to complete the project. For this, you'll need a cutter, pliers, wrenches, and screwdrivers. This video is part of a series, each focused on a specific part of the bike to be assembled. Make sure you watch each one and take your time as you put your bike together to ensure that it is assembled properly and safely. Enjoy the ride!
You'll need a 6mm hex wrench to complete this step. Make sure the fork is facing forward. Loosen the stem binder bolt and insert the wedge-shaped part at the bottom of the stem far enough into the steer tube that the minimum insertion mark can't be seen. Tighten the stem binder bolt, keeping the handlebars aligned with the front fork. Adjust the height as needed for alignment, rider fit, and comfort. You'll need a wrench to complete this step. Release the brake when present and loosen the wheel axle nuts enough for the fork ends to fit. Seat the axle completely in the dropout slots with the washers on the outside. If the washers have hooks or steps, place them inside the small holes on the fork dropouts. Center the wheel and tighten each axle nut gradually and evenly by switching sides until both are secure. If the wheel is not centered, loosen the axle nut on the side with a smaller gap. Shift and hold the wheel on center and retighten the nut. Make sure to refasten the brake when present. Some tread patterns are directional and need to face a certain way. Make certain the front wheel is oriented correctly. Locate the quick release skewer and remove the adjustment nut, outer spring, and washer. With the quick release lever on the opposite side of the chain, slide the skewer through the front wheel axle. Replace the outer spring with its smaller end toward the wheel, and loosely thread the adjusting nut onto the skewer. With the brake released, seat the axle completely in the fork dropout slots, keeping the wheel as centered as possible. Hold the quick release lever in an open position and hand tighten the adjusting nut until some resistance is felt. The correct tension is achieved when the lever requires a firm hand to close, but is not forced. With the handle closed, spin the wheel to be certain that it's centered and properly seated. Make sure to refasten the brake when present. You'll need a 14mm wrench to complete this step. Apply grease to the outside of the seat post. Loosen the seat clamp bolt and insert the seat post far enough into the seat tube so that the minimum insertion mark can't be seen. Align the seat with the top tube of the frame and tighten the bolt until the clamp holds the seat post firmly in position. Adjust the seat height as needed for alignment, rider fit, and comfort. Apply grease to the outside of the seat post. Unlock the quick release lever and insert the seat post far enough into the seat tube that the minimum insertion mark can't be seen. Align the seat with the top tube of the frame and tighten the adjusting nut until the lever, when closed, holds the seat post firmly in position. Adjust the seat height as needed for alignment, rider fit, and comfort. You'll need a 15mm open-ended wrench to complete this step. Pedals are directional and conveniently marked with an L for left and R for right. The R pedal should be matched to the right-hand crank arm on the chain side of the bike and is threaded in a clockwise direction. while the L pedal should be matched to the left side crank arm and is threaded in a counterclockwise direction. Start threading each pedal by hand 2 to 3 turns in the correct direction on the appropriate crank arm, then wrench tighten. You'll need a 5mm hex wrench to complete this step. Check the brake cable is seated in the brake lever. Squeeze the brake arms together with one hand until the pads touch the rim. With the other hand, pull the cable and insert the end of the noodle into the carrier. Loosen the cable anchor bolt so the cable moves freely. Pull the cable through the anchor until the left brake arm sits about 1/8 of an inch from the rim. While still holding the cable, move the right brake arm until it reaches the same distance from the rim, and tighten the cable anchor bolt completely. Check the brakes are centered to the wheel. If the gaps between the pads and the rim are not the same on both sides, loosen the anchor bolt and adjust until even. You'll need a Phillips head screwdriver to complete this step. Look at the brakes over the tire to see if they are centered. If the gaps between the brake pads and the wheel are not even on both sides, this will need to be adjusted. Make sure the wheel is centered. Squeeze the brake levers to test operation. Then start with the arm closest to the rim or the arm that is moving improperly. In small increments of 1/4 to 1/2 turns, rotate the brake arm screws in the appropriate direction to move them in or out. Clockwise rotation moves the pad away from the rim, while counterclockwise moves the pad closer. When the pads are at a 1/8 inch gap on both sides, check the centering by squeezing the brakes. If the brake arms don't move evenly, they may need to be fine-tuned through a series of adjustments. You'll need a 10mm wrench to complete this step. Caliper brakes should be centered to the wheel. If one of the caliper arms moves more than the other, or not at all, the brakes can't operate properly. To adjust, first check that the wheel is centered. Then compare the gaps between the wheel and fork and the pads and rim. To center the brake, loosen the caliper mounting lock nut and position the brake so both arms move equally. Squeeze the brake lever to hold the caliper closed while tightening the nut. Release the lever and recheck. Repeat the adjustment if it shifts out of place. You'll need a 9mm wrench to complete this step. Loosen the cable anchor bolt so the wire slides freely. Squeeze the caliper arms with one hand so the pads touch the rim, and with the other hand, pull the cable tight through the anchor bolt. Hand tighten the anchor bolt, and then wrench tighten. Use the adjustment barrels to fine-tune the brake cable tension. You will need a 5mm hex wrench to complete this step. Brake pads should be evenly centered on the rim. To adjust, loosen the bolt and reposition the pad. Retighten the bolt. You'll need a wrench and a Phillips head screwdriver to complete this step. With the rear gear shifter set to the largest number, disconnect the rear derailleur cable from the anchor bolt and place the chain on the smallest sprocket. Adjust the high limit screw so the guide pulley and the chain are vertically lined up with the smallest sprocket. Pull the cable taut, reconnect it, and tighten the cable anchor bolt. Now, with the rear shifter set to gear 1, place the chain on the largest sprocket and adjust the low limit screw in quarter-turn increments until the guide pulley and chain are vertically lined up with the largest sprocket. If it's difficult getting the chain on the largest sprocket, turn the low limit screw counterclockwise to move the chain closer to the wheel. To test, Shift through the gears, making sure each gear is achieved quietly and without hesitation. If there are issues, fine-tune the cable tension by rotating the barrel adjuster in the appropriate direction to move the derailleur cage closer to or away from the bicycle. Fine-tuning may take a series of adjustments. You'll need a wrench and Phillips head screwdriver to complete this step. With both shifters set to the smallest number, disconnect the cable from the anchor bolt and place the chain on the corresponding sprocket and chain wheel. The position of the front derailleur should be parallel with the largest chain wheel, and the chain guide should clear the chain wheel by 1 to 3 millimeters. Adjust the low limit screw so the chain is approximately centered in the front derailleur cage. Pull the cable taut, reconnect it, and tighten the cable anchor bolt. Now, set the front shifter to the highest number and move the chain to the largest chain wheel. If the chain doesn't go on to the largest chain wheel, turn the high limit screw counterclockwise in 1/4 turn increments until the chain engages. If the chain falls off, turn the high limit screw clockwise in 1/4 turn increments until the chain no longer falls off. To test, shift through the gears, making sure each gear is achieved quietly and without hesitation. Fine-tuning may take a series of adjustments. You'll need a hex wrench to complete this step. Loosen the handlebar binder bolts and center the handlebar to the bike. Make sure the brake and shift cable are routed properly around the handlebar, so they're taking the smoothest path across the bike with no snags or twists. Alternate tightening the bolts a little at a time, keeping the gap between the stem cap and the stem even until the handlebar is firmly secured. Identify the correct tire pressure as indicated on the tire sidewall. Remove the valve cap and secure the pump to the stem. Inflate to the correct tire pressure. Securely replace the valve cap. You'll need a Phillips head screwdriver to complete this step. Check and confirm the front and rear reflectors are installed correctly, facing either directly forward or backward and perpendicular to the road surface. The front white reflector should be mounted on the handlebar, and the rear red reflector mounted to the seat post.